سعد الدين الحريري رئيسا لمجلس الوزراء.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Janine and these are today's top stories. Russian President Vladimir Putin rules out expelling U.S. diplomats in retaliation for Washington's decision to oust 35 Russian diplomats. President Michel Aoun receives a delegation from the Interior Ministry headed by Minister Nuhad Mashnouk and vows to maintain stability and security in the country. And clashes between rebels and Syrian government forces erupt near Damascus despite a Russian and Turkish-backed ceasefire. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ruled out expelling anyone in retaliation for Washington's decision to throw out 35 Russian diplomats and impose sanctions on two of the country's intelligence agencies. RIA news agency quoted Putin as saying he will consider the actions of President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office next month, when deciding on further steps in Russia-U.S. relations. Earlier, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov proposed to Putin that Moscow expel 35 U.S. diplomats and ban U.S. diplomatic staff from using two facilities in Moscow. This followed President Barack Obama's decision to expel the Russian diplomats suspected of spying and to impose sanctions on the two Russian intelligence agencies over their alleged involvement in hacking U.S. political groups in this year's presidential election. Now for some news in Lebanon, the Interior Ministry says it is ready to oversee the implementation of election procedures according to whichever law political factions agree on. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnouk's remarks came during a meeting with President Michel Aoun at the head of a delegation from the ministry. The minister has previously said that next year's parliamentary elections must either be based on the current majoritarian voting law or be postponed, arguing that any new vote law will require more time to prepare. Aoun, for his part, told the delegation he will seek to evolve and mechanize state administrations and institutions affiliated with the ministry. He also vowed to maintain stability and security in the country. Charges were pressed against 7 suspects, 2 of whom in custody for belonging to an extremist group and conducting terror acts. Military prosecutor Judge Sa'ed accused the 7 of joining the ranks of Daesh, planning to conduct terror acts, planting bombs in different areas, and recruiting on behalf of the group. They were reportedly referred to First Military Investigative Judge Riyad Abu Ghaida for questioning. Syrian government warplanes have carried out at least 16 airstrikes against rebels in the northern Hama province in the latest spate of violence to interrupt a Russian and Turkish-backed ceasefire. This is according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which did not immediately report any casualties. Fighting between government forces and rebels also took place in Wadi Barada near Damascus since the truce took effect. The observatory said it was not clear who had started the clashes. The damage in Wadi Barada and neighboring Ain al-Fijeh has reportedly created severe water shortages in Damascus. Moving on to Iraq, Iraqi forces faced car bombs and fierce resistance from ISIS militants in southern Mosul, the second day of a renewed push to take back the city after fighting stalled for several weeks. Iraqi forces in the east and north of the city were clearing areas they had recaptured on Thursday before advancing any further. The army was reportedly trying to cut supply lines to the town of Tel Kaif, north of Mosul. Egypt's cabinet has approved the transfer of 2 Red Sea islands to Saudi Arabia despite protests earlier this year and a court ruling the transfer as unconstitutional. The state-run MENA news agency reported that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's government approved the deal and sent it to Parliament for ratification, despite the court ruling which the government has appealed. The transfer was announced alongside a Saudi aid package, leading critics to condemn it as a land sell-off. The government, however, says the uninhabited islands, Tiran and Sanafir, were always part of Saudi Arabia but were placed under Egypt's protection decades ago over fears of an Israeli attack. Coming up next, world number 2 tennis player Serena Williams is engaged. Stay tuned for the gossip. Welcome back. Madrid has banned all privately owned cars with even-numbered registration plates from the Spanish capital's roads to curb rising air pollution. The move follows a dry, sunny stretch of weather which sent levels of nitrogen oxide, a poisonous gas which can cause respiratory problems such as asthma, soaring above EU set limits. Officials said all vehicles could be on the road today, but parking restrictions in Madrid's center will remain. More details in this report.
Millions of motorists may not get to drive their cars through Madrid. A dry stretch of sunny weather is sending pollution levels soaring above European Union set limits. The city banned all privately owned cars with even-numbered registration plates from its streets for Thursday. It says those restrictions could alternate between odd and even-number plates for as long as the severe pollution continues. The new measures are getting mixed reactions from locals.
We who have even number plates can't leave the city. I don't know why. I think it restricts my freedom.
We can't maintain these traffic levels, improve public transportation and restrict private traffic. Also vehicle technical controls or the promotion of more electric cars.
Madrid, which has almost 4 million cars, has been cracking down on air pollution later than other European cities. Earlier in December, Paris imposed similar driving restrictions. And on Thursday, with pollution levels peaking again, the French capital offered free residential parking to people abandoning their cars after a month of some of the worst pollution in a decade.
With drug violence on the rise and more U.S. states legalizing the use of marijuana, Mexico seems locked in prohibitionist policies. Mexican drug gang violence has shot up again to its worst level in 4 years, making lawmakers reluctant to follow President Enrique Peña Nieto's calls to further liberalize marijuana. Samantha Varas reports.
A marijuana-fueled inferno. Mexico's military burning huge packets of weed as part of a heavy drug crackdown. The Senate voted to legalize medical marijuana earlier this month, but that hasn't yet been written into law in a country where the drug trade leaves a brutal body count year after year.
Mexico needs to move forward and soon. It doesn't make any sense for us to continue with all these deaths while in the US marijuana is being legalized.
Mexico was forced to rethink its prohibitionist stance on marijuana last month when California became the first border state to vote for legalization for recreational use. But while the gang-ravaged country plays catch-up, critics say it's a small step in tackling a huge problem. Since the government began a military-led crackdown on drugs 10 years ago, more than 100,000 people have died in gang-related violence. Drug reform advocates are concerned about Mexico's widening gap with the US on legislation as criminal violence surges south of the border, though some Mexicans are still against the idea of change.
I don't want it legalized here in Mexico because it would be super easy for youngsters to get a hold of, and the drug takes over them. They fall behind in their studies. It taints people.
In Tijuana, a border town synonymous with Mexican drug traffickers selling to US buyers, some locals fear the fallout of any possible change to cannabis law, saying cartels could turn to kidnapping and extortion to make up for lost cash.
The discovery of a body in a burnout car in Rio de Janeiro state has sparked fears that it might be that of the Greek ambassador to Brazil. Kyriakos Amiridis had been missing for 3 days and was last seen on Monday in the Baixada Fluminense region north of Rio. Amiridis had been on holiday with his family in Rio de Janeiro's northern Nova Iguaçu area since December 21st. He was due to fly back to Brasilia on January 9th. World number 2 tennis player Serena Williams is engaged to Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. Alicia Powell reports.
Serena Williams finds her ace. The world's number 2 tennis star has become engaged to Alexis Ohanian, co-founder of the social media company Reddit. Williams shared some of the engagement details on the social media site, saying, "I came home a little late. Someone had a bag packed for me, and a carriage awaited. Destination, Rome, back to where our stars first collided. Down on one knee, he said 4 words, and I said yes." The New York-born tech entrepreneur confirmed the news on his Facebook page, writing, "She said yes." Williams is considered the best player of her generation. She has won 22 Grand Slam singles titles, the same as German Steffi Graf, and trailing only Australian Margaret Court.
Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is set to remain at the top spot in the box office for a 3rd week in a row, beating out recent box office releases. The new Star Wars saga has already grossed $653 million at the worldwide box office. Here's the trailer.
The world is coming undone. Imperial flags reign across the galaxy.
Can you be trusted without your shackles?
Let's just get this over with, shall we?
We've a mission for you. A major weapons test is imminent. We need to know how to destroy it.
If you're really doing this, I want to help.
Good.
Good. I've been recruiting for the rebellion for a long time.
We destroyed our home. I fight the Empire now.
I fear nothing. All is as the Force wills it.
The captain says you are a friend. I will not kill you.
Thanks. There isn't much time. Every day they grow stronger.
There is a 97.6% chance of failure. He means well.
This is our chance to make a real difference. Are you with me?
All the way.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Russian President Vladimir Putin rules out expelling U.S. diplomats in retaliation for Washington's decision to oust 35 Russian diplomats. Lebanese President Michel Aoun receives a delegation from the Interior Ministry headed by Minister Nuhad Mashnouk and vows to maintain stability and security in the country. And clashes between rebels and Syrian government forces erupt near Damascus despite a Russian and Turkish-backed ceasefire. Those are your top stories for this Friday. I'm Linda Tamim and I wish you all a very nice weekend.
سعد الدين الحريري رئيسا لمجلس الوزراء.